In this video, we are going to be talking about what an emergency fund is, why you need one, how much to put in it, and where to put it to make it grow. So, first of all, what is an emergency fund? Well, an emergency fund is basically a bucket of money that you put aside to handle emergencies in case you lose your job, in case your car breaks down. If something happens to you, someone gets sick, anything can happen, right? So if something happens to you, you need to make sure that you can afford to live for a certain amount of time. So the general rule of thumb is you want to have a specific number of months of living expenses socked away in an account that you can get to easily, but you don't touch it, right? It's put aside in case something happens and you lose your job and you have to pay your bills. So emergency funds are absolutely an essential part to a sound financial plan. And being set up for an unexpected emergency is so important because interest rates on credit cards are really high. And what happens is you end up getting in this rabbit hole of compounding interest working against you. And so these high interest credit cards are like literally the worst thing you could possibly put an emergency on, because it's just going to bring you more into this debt cycle that you won't be able to get out of eventually. So it's really important to think about this ahead of time. I know that it kind of sucks to think about something bad happening to you. It sucks to think about losing your job potentially and so on and so forth. But this is what sound financial planning is for yourself. It's going through, looking at all of your required expenses to live. Okay, we're talking about you got to eat, you need groceries, you got to pay your electricity bill. What are the essentials? I'm not talking about cable. I may or may not even be talking about internet. I know internet is kind of one of those super essentials these days, but if something happened to you and you had to live and survive, what are those expenses? Break those down. Maybe you want to add in a few extra things that you know you're going to want to have, like the cable, for example, and then make your plan based on the expenses that you want to be able to cover for a certain amount of time. That's fine, but make sure that you just think it through, write it out, get that monthly number of what it costs you to live your life, and then multiply that by a specific number of months, which we're going to get into next to figure out how many months should you put into an emergency fund. So for a general, for the general financial planning rule, if you're a solo income earner in a household, so maybe you have a spouse that doesn't work, but you work, or maybe you're alone, you're the head of your household, you rule the roost, and it's just you. Either way, either one of those scenarios, if there's a solo income earner in a household, the general rule of thumb in the financial planning industry is 6 months. You want 6 months of living expenses to be able to survive, saved away in an account, bucket of money, out of sight, out of mind, right? The other side of the spectrum is, and it's a little more lenient, if there are 2 income earners in a household, so you've got 2 streams of income, then the general rule of thumb is that you only need 3 months of living expenses socked away. So this is a very general rule, right? It's possible that you may require more money to survive than for your risk tolerance. You may want more. You may only feel comfortable with having a year's worth of living expenses saved. You may feel comfortable doubling what the general guideline is, or maybe it's fine where it is. If you live in a very strong jobs market, let's say it's very easy to get a job because you live in a booming city, then you may not be as concerned with having, a whole lot of emergency funds put aside versus somebody that lives in a slower market, and they may not have the same skill set, or they may just be in a completely different field of work that is a little more difficult to find a job. Then you may need to put that into perspective when you're making your plan for your emergency fund. So to recap, general rule of thumb, if you have 1 income earner in a household, 6 months of living expenses is what you would want to have put away. If there are 2 income earners in a household, it's 3 months of living expenses put away. Take that, do your math, figure out how much that is, and then adjust it to fit what makes you feel comfortable and secure. We know why we need an emergency fund, because stuff happens. We know how much to put in it. Either 3 months or 6 months is the general rule of thumb, depending on solo or dual income earners. Now we need to put it somewhere where it's going to grow for us, because this is more than just putting money aside and letting it sit in a checking account or a commercial savings account. We want to actually put the money to work. If we're going to have a chunk of money saved, we want to put that money to work. So the way we do that is, for emergency funds, you want it somewhere where you can access it easily. So usually the general rule of thumb is you want to put it in some type of savings account, or a high yield savings account, or a very short-term CD, certificate of deposit, which pays you interest. A year or less is considered a liquid certificate of deposit, a liquid place to put emergency funds. But that might not be the best play, especially right now with the way interest rates are. I think high-yield online savings accounts are great. I think that they are underutilized in many households. Some people know about them. Some people have never even heard of them. So I'm just going to introduce you to a few that I actually really like. So here's the thing about high-yield online savings accounts. These accounts exist online because these banks basically don't have the overhead that commercial banks do, like your Wells Fargo and your Chase. So they're able to pay a higher interest rate to account holders. So I went to ally.com, ALLY.com. And this is their main website, but what you do is you go to bank, and then here's your online savings. There's also CDs down here that you can explore, but for emergency funds, you really want them liquid, and an online savings account is the most liquid way to save your money and actually have it grow at the same time. So this is paying an interest rate of 2.20% on all balance tiers. So basically, even if you have $50 in it, it's going to pay you 2.20%. So this is actually, I think it's over 20 times the average interest paid by a commercial bank. So I think that online savings accounts are awesome. The interest rates can go up over time if the Federal Reserve increases interest rates as well. We've seen pretty recently, we've had 0 interest rates for a very long time, since the 2008 financial crisis. And now we're starting to kind of see accounts pay a little bit more. Obviously, 2.2% isn't exceptional, but hey, it's better than nothing. It's better than 0. And your money will grow over time. The more you add to it, the bigger it gets. And so it's a very powerful tool. Compounding interest is a very powerful tool. Everybody needs to utilize compound interest. This is one way to do it with funds that are being saved for emergencies. Another account is Synchrony. So Synchrony has an online high-yield savings account here. I'm going to click that. And you can already see they have it advertised 2.25%, no minimum balance. So that's pretty awesome. It's actually a little bit higher than Ally. So they're just online accounts that make your money work for you. So put that money to work with one of these accounts. Now, I like to actually introduce bankrate.com to people, because it kind of just lays some of the banks out. Obviously, they kind of are particular who they're putting here, because they probably get paid commissions for referring people to these banks, but it just kind of gives you an idea of some of the banks out there. You can actually put in your zip code and see what interest rates you can get at certain banks around you. So Marcus by Goldman Sachs is a pretty popular investment firm. So that's pretty well known. Barclays is pretty well known as well. I don't know much about the PNC. I've heard is pretty popular, but haven't really heard much about this bank. So you can kind of browse through this and get an idea of what's being offered where and where your money is best put. So some savings accounts are lower. Capital One is actually giving a lower interest rate than some of the other ones, but Capital One's a really big bank as well. They do a lot of different things. So they're not given as much for savings as this online account is at Barclays or PNC Bank, for example. So I like Bankrate. You can just Google the best online savings accounts, Bankrate, and you'll find this. But for the most part, these are two really popular ones, Synchrony and Ally. And you can get your emergency funds working for you and growing that money, honey. So that is why you need an emergency fund, where to put it, and hopefully that was helpful. Again, you have to find the number that's right for you. You have to find what amount of, how many months of savings to live off of makes you comfortable, and go with that. And there's no right or wrong answer. So if you even start with $50 a month, I mean, I know it sounds like an undertaking if you don't have one at all, but small changes can lead to big results. So even if you're putting away $50 a month to this account and make it a high yield savings account and just let it grow, keep depositing money, you will, little steps will help you reach your goals over time. And so, I just like to encourage people, even if you don't have a lot of money right now, to set up your emergency fund. You can start with something, and small steps lead to big achievements. So we'll catch you in the next video.